Your next module is Working Capital Management Part 2. What exactly do we have in this module? Cash and credit management, corporate banking arrangements and financing decisions, and working capital. So let us discuss these one by one. Let's go for cash and credit management. Management of cash and cash equivalent. This would be the first subtopic in cash and credit management. Management of account receivables. Let us discuss these two one by one. Cash is the most important resource in the current assets. It ensures liquidity. That means you will be able to make payments on time. You will be able to meet your obligations on time. So the factors to consider: what's the volume of our collections? How much cash are we expecting to receive in the coming months or coming weeks? When do we expect to receive it? What would be the idle cash available to us, which we can use to invest in the short term to generate interest? And what is float? Basically, there are two types of float. One is the disbursement float, one is the collection float. Means when you receive a check from our customer, how many days does it take us to collect the cash in our bank account? It takes 5 days. And when we pay a check to our vendor, on average it takes 6 days or 8 days to clear. Ideally, what should happen? You should collect your cash as quickly as possible. Your collection float should be as short as possible, and your payment float should be as large as or as long as possible. That will give you much needed liquidity you need. Collect as quickly as possible and delay your payment as late as possible, but without damaging your relationship with your vendor. This is very important. You need to manage your float this way. Minimize your collection float, collect as quickly as possible, and delay as late as possible without damaging your relationship. This is an important point. Right, then we have motives for holding cash. Why do we hold cash? This idea was nicely explained by British economist John Maynard Keynes. He said that you have 3 reasons to hold cash. The first reason to hold cash is the transaction motive. We hold cash so that we can enter into different transactions. We can make payment to suppliers, we can make payment to our employees. That's transaction. We hold cash so that we can enter into transactions. Next is speculative motive. We hold cash so that we can take advantage of some opportunity that comes our way. If any opportunity comes, we can take benefit of. Let's say if the prices of your material fall significantly and you have surplus cash, quickly go ahead and buy the items you need, the material you need at low price. Right? This is what you call speculative motive. And precautionary motive, you hold cash to meet any unexpected contingency, unexpected need. Okay, next we have disadvantages of high cash levels. Yes, when you hold high cash levels, there are certain disadvantages. There is a concept called the negative arbitrage. Means that interest obligations you have to pay. You borrow funds from banks and you need to pay interest on it. So when you hold excessive cash, your interest obligations that you may have to pay to your fund providers, it might exceed from the income that could be earned from investing the surplus cash somewhere. Don't do that. Don't hold extra cash. You need to put somewhere to make some good use of the cash available. Threat of takeover. When you have tons of cash in your bank accounts, in your reserve, you will become a very attractive target for different companies. They will try to acquire your company so as to get hold of your cash assets. You become quite an attractive target if you have hold lots of cash. And the third point is that when you hold so much cash, this is an indication that you are a bad manager. You are not allocating your assets efficiently. Surplus cash in your checking account does not generate return. It's bad asset allocation. Then how to increase cash levels? Let's say if you are in the cash shortage position, how can we increase our cash levels? We can increase our cash through faster collection. We should have an efficient credit administration department. We should have good cash collectors who should regularly pursue payments from the customers. That's just I discussed a little while ago. Collect as quickly as possible and delay payment as far as practical without damaging your relationship with your vendor. So collect as quickly and delay the payment as far as you can without offending your suppliers. Next part is management of account receivables. Your customers to whom you sell on credit. For this, you should have a clear credit policy. You should have a clear credit policy established by, there are many committees in the board of directors. Remuneration committee, then you have the audit committee, the risk committee. Then there is also what you call a credit committee. This committee will establish a credit policy for the firm. It will involve the credit period, the time that we will give to our customers to pay. Remember, it should not be too long because this will put you in trouble of cash shortage. It shouldn't be too short. If it's too short, maybe your competitors can take away your customers. So credit period should neither be too long nor too short. Credit standards. How do we decide who should get credit? There are many customers who want to purchase on credit from you. How do you decide who should be awarded credit? So you need to assess the strength of your credit customers, how strong they are, will they be able to pay back on time? Then collection policy. See, you should neither be very stringent, too stiff that you file cases against your customers, nor should you be too lax. You need to strike a balance, just like credit period should neither be too long nor too short. Your collection policy must not be too stiff and must not be too lax. It must be a balance. See, life is balance. Life is balanced, neither too hard nor too soft. So just same thing, collection policy must neither be too stringent that it just it frightens your customers, nor should it be too lax that your customers eat you away. Balance the act. Then discounts. Yes, you can offer discounts to your customer so that they make payment on time. But that's what we discussed, early payment discount. So discounts will attract your customers and they will pay you early. Now we have some good formulas to discuss. First is the account receivable turnover. And this is calculated using this formula. Let's say your annual sale is it's $350,000. Ideally, you should have credit sales, but if the information given is only for sales, just use the net sales. Ideally, you should have the net credit sales, but you can take sales if credit sale isn't given. And let's say your average receivables are $75,000. Now, what this formula gives you is something important to learn. 350 divided by 75 means about 4.67. This tells you how many times do your customers pay you in 1 year. They pay you 4.6 times, or almost they pay you 5 times in 1 year. Whether it is good or bad, we can't say unless we compare this ATO with some competitor. So my customers pay me 5 times in 1 year. My competitor, his customers pay him 7 times in 1 year. And the industry average is about 8. So which means I am a bit slow. My customers delay making payment to me, so I need to do something to fix this problem up. Sometimes this is difficult to understand. 4.6 times ATU, average account receivable turnover. This is sometimes confusing for the layman to understand. So we have just reversed this formula in a more meaningful way. This is a much more meaningful modification to this formula. Like if my customers pay me 5 times in 1 year, I would like to calculate after how many days do they pay me. For this, we have another formula, days sales in account receivables. It means how many days of my sales remains outstanding. For this, what we do, we take ending account receivable, divide it with the sales and multiply it with the number of days in the period, that is maybe 360 or 365 or 300, whatever is given. This formula will give me my average collection period. Average collection, after how many days does my average customer pay me, or sometimes it is called days sales in account receivable. How many days sale is outstanding in my customer's account? So this gives you the average collection period. So just if I use this 5 and replace it here, I will be able to calculate number of days. I can give you the net result, 360 by 5. The result of this would be approximately 72 days, which means my customers pay me on average after 72 days. This is the average collection period. This is the number of times they pay me. Or you can also say that my sales remain outstanding in account receivable for 72 days. Days sales in account receivables. 72 days sales, 72 days sales remains uncollected in my account receivable. In other words, my AR is equal to my 72 days of sales. That's another way of putting it. Or my average customer pays me after 72 days. There are many ways to interpret this very helpful formula. Okay, next, how we can speed up collection. Methods of speeding up cash collection from our customers. First thing you should do is to screen your prospective customers. Do not sell to every Tom, Dick and Harry. You shouldn't do that. Just to increase your sales, you should not sell blindly. You have to screen your customers. You should sell to those customers who are able to pay back on time, right? So you need to screen your customers so that only those customers come in the picture who are good customers, who will pay you back in time. You should bill promptly. Means do not wait till the end of the month and then you raise the invoice. Ideally, what the companies I worked for, interestingly, the companies I worked for, almost in every company I worked for, they immediately billed the day they sold the goods. They didn't wait for the delivery to occur. Mostly some firms first deliver and then they raise the invoice. My firm used to generate invoice on the same day when the goods were dispatched. So prompt billing means bill as quickly as possible so that you can collect the money as quickly as possible. Next is payment discounts. You can offer early payment discount just like your vendors offer you the early payment discount. You can also offer the early payment discounts to your customers. Then you can expedite deposits through electronic fund transfer. You ask your customers to directly deposit the money in your bank through electronic fund transfer. Then there is a very helpful system used widely in the US called the lockbox system. How this system works, we channel all our payments to a post office lockbox. We ask our customers to directly send their checks not to us but to a lockbox at the post office. We authorize our banker to collect the checks on our behalf, and on every day whatever the checks are collected, simply deposit them in my account and let us know through a remittance advice, through a banker's advice. So basically this is quite a quicker way. The amounts, the checks will come through the lockbox directly to the bank, and you don't have to wait for the checks to come to you and then you deposit in the bank, then the money will come. This is quite a convenient way. Of course, bank will charge some fee for it, but this will quite drastically change the time in which the money is collected in your bank account. Then we have another important tool to speed up our cash collections, concentration banking. What we do in concentration banking, we maintain a single bank where we concentrate or collect all our payments or all our receipts, in other words, and this centralized bank is used as a hub of our cash management, and from this bank account we transfer just enough amounts to some other subsidiary accounts to make payments to our suppliers, to make payments to our employees for salaries, and to payment of taxes and so on. And we keep the sizable cash in this account and then use it for making some short-term investments, right? So this will improve the controls in the system. You will be able to make good use of the idle cash balances available in this account and make good use of the funds. Then we have an important tool here called factoring. What is factoring? You simply transfer the collection of your account receivable to a third party, and that third party for a certain amount of fee will collect the money on your behalf and will charge quite a large amount as a factoring fee. So third party arrangement, we will discuss this in the next slide. Let's do this first and then we'll move on. Radon Technologies enters into an agreement with a firm that will factor the company's account receivable. Means we will turn over our account receivable to them and they will collect the money on our behalf and they will charge some fee. The factor, the company to whom we have turned our receivables, this factor company agrees to buy the company's receivables, which average 50,000 per month. That's the monthly account receivable, and have an average collection period of 30 days. Okay. The factor will advance up to 80% of the value of the receivables at an annual fee of 12%, at an annual rate of 12%, and charge a 2% fee on all receivables purchased. The controller of the company estimates that the company would save $10,000 in collection expenses over the year. Since this factoring company is responsible for collection, so we don't need our own collection department, so this means we will save $10,000. Fee and interest are not deducted in advance. Assuming a 360 day a year, what is the annual cost of financing through factoring? Now let us first see what is our monthly receivable. Our monthly receivable is $50,000. We will have to pay 2% fee on this. 2% of $50,000 will be $1,000, right? Since the collection period is 30 days, and how many periods of 30 days are there in 360? If you divide 360 with 30, it means there will be 12 such occurrences. Or in other words, you have to pay 1,000 times 12. This is the payment to be made to your factoring company. 1,000 times 12, because there are 12 periods of 30 days each in 1 year. This goes to the factoring company. Then the factoring company will withhold 20% of the total receivables amount. The factor will advance up to 80% of the face value, which means 20% will not be given. 20% of 50,000 will be 10,000, which means what is advanced to you is the net amount, $40,000. It further says that the factoring company will charge an annual rate of 12% on this amount. Since there will be 40,000 of each payment for 12 periods, so you are going to multiply it with 12. Remember, the collection period is 30. 40,000 multiplied by 12 for annual calculation. So on annual basis, 40,000 is the net amount advanced on monthly basis. So charging a 12% interest on it is going to be 4,800. So the total amount that the company will have to pay to the out of this collection to the factoring company is 16,800. Remember, this is the 2% factoring fee, and the remaining amount, the bank that the factoring company will give you, will have to pay 12% charge on it as per this. The factor will advance up to 80% of the face value of the receivable at an annual rate of 12%. That's the advance and trust charged by the factoring company. So this is the total amount charged by the factoring company. Now this is the cost to you. Remember, there is a benefit also. We don't have to pay this $10,000 of collection fee. So if you calculate the net cost of factoring, it's going to be 16,800 less 10,000. The net cost of factoring is $6,800. Right? Now we have to calculate the effective interest rate. How do we calculate the effective interest rate? There's a very helpful formula. Effective interest rate is equal to the interest expense or net expense divided by the usable funds. Interest expense is 6,800 and usable funds we use for annual basis is 40,000. So 6,800 is the interest expense divided by 40,000 of usable funds. So the effective interest, 6,800 divided by 40,000, it's 17%. So your effective cost of this factoring arrangement is 17%. Good or bad, it's totally up to you. How do you compare this cost with the other sources of finance? Our next subtopic is corporate banking arrangements. And in corporate banking arrangement means you need borrowing from the bank. Every business, at least for all the businesses I have worked for, we need to borrow money from the bank. We need funding from the bank, right? So one of these is the letter of credit. Let's say a company issues a commercial paper. I hope you remember from your earlier studies, commercial paper is a short-term instrument that you can issue to the general public up to a 270 days max, and you can obtain funds for your liquidity requirements. Unfortunately, commercial paper is not backed by any collateral. There is no collateral behind commercial paper like your mortgage bonds and other instruments. So how do we convince our investors? So such instruments are guaranteed by third party like a bank. So in case if I default on making payment on this commercial paper, the banker will assume the liability and make the payment to the investors. Normally it doesn't happen because commercial papers are normally issued by companies that have good credit ratings. So letter of credit is issued against such commercial papers is a kind of guarantee by the bank. If the company is unable to make the payment, then the banker will make the payment on behalf of the company. This is also used in international trade where my supplier doesn't know me. Through letter of credit, if I can bring my bank in the picture, then the foreign seller can take some confidence in me. He can sell goods to me. Even if I default, my banker will pay on my behalf. So letter of credit basically is a guarantee by the bank. In case if I fail to pay, the banker will make payment on my behalf. Then we have line of credit. This is a very helpful financing tool for the firm. It's like a revolving bank loan. I have a line of credit up to, let's say, $2 million with my banker. This is like an upper ceiling. I can overdraw this account up to $2 million. And every time I withdraw the amount above my balance, I will have to pay a certain amount of interest at a certain rate. So when I collect money from my customers, I will deposit the money back into this account, just like credit card. I keep on paying from it, and when money comes, I put it back into this line of credit. So this is a renewable line of credit which can be renewed at maturity each year or each period. So those firms that are into a specific seasonal business where they need money for a certain period of time, up to a certain limit, they can arrange for this line of credit, revolving line of credit. This was right here. So like a revolving loan with a certain limit, like 2 million, and it is good for the business that are seasonal in nature. Next is the borrowing capacity. Borrowing capacity here means that you cannot borrow unlimited amounts of funds. There has to be some upper limit. Borrowing capacity means the limit on borrowing. I can't borrow whatever I want, because the lender will be willing to give me loan up to a certain amount, keeping in mind what collateral do I have, what is my income level, how strong I am financially to repay back the loan, what is my level of liquidity. So all these are considered before the banker or the lender will give me the money, because every provider of fund is careful, because they cannot provide you unlimited amounts of funds. They have to see what collateral you can offer. What is your payback capability? Are you financially strong enough to pay back? Right? So this is important. So you can't borrow whatever you want. There is always a limit to which the lender will be willing to pay. Then the last one is the debt covenant. Now, this is a very important point here. Debt covenants. What are debt covenants? Debt covenants are certain restrictions. Let's say I borrow funds from a bank. Banker puts certain restrictions that you will do this, you will do this, you will do this, you will do this, and you will not do this, you will not do this, you will not do this. This is included in the contract of the bank loan. These are the covenants, the restrictions, protective clauses in the agreement that I signed with the lender. So these are the protection for the lender. They could be positive, they could be negative. If I violate these conditions, then I may have to pay back the loan. So what are the common types of restrictions put in a loan agreement? Company cannot issue further debt. Remember, there are two types of covenants. The positive covenants, which ask the company to do something. The borrower will do something. And negative covenants mean the borrowers will not do. So these are the do's and don'ts, in other words. Do's are called the positive covenants. Don'ts are called the negative covenants. So when you say the positive covenants mean the company will keep the collateral in good shape. Company will maintain a certain debt ratio. Company will maintain a certain leverage ratio. Negative clauses mean the company cannot issue additional debt. Company cannot pay dividends for the next 5 years. Company cannot sell certain assets. So positive covenants, they ask company to do something. And negative covenants mean that these are not to be done. These are the restrictions. Now, if there is a violation of the covenant, if the company violates whether the positive covenant or the negative covenant, then the creditors, they will ask the money back. They will say, okay, now you have violated the covenant, so now give our money back. And now if you just want to go on, then you may have to renegotiate the contract. Then it is possible you will be charged a certain penalty, or maybe the interest rate could be revised, or maybe the term of the debt could be changed. So this could be a trouble for you. Now the last area we have is the financing decisions and working capital. Okay, short-term financing. When you say short-term financing, it means financing that is available for 1 year. That means they will be maturing within 1 year. Rates on such financing tends to be lower. Like let's say if the long-term debt is available at 10%, short-term borrowing will be available at, let's say, 8%. So the rates on short-term borrowing are lower than long-term rates. What would be the effect on working capital? Of course, Since it's a liability, if you take a loan, it will come on the positive side of your current assets, and at the same time it will become a current liability. So your current assets and your current liability, they increase by the same amount. So effectively the effect on working capital is nil. So what are the advantages for going for short-term funding? Short-term funding come at a lower rate. That's the major advantage, because the rate on the short-term funding is lower than the long-term rate. That's the major advantage. And you can make good use of this funding in increasing profitability. You can shorten your operating cycle, and as your operating cycle shortens, you make more money, you make more profit. And what are the disadvantages? The rate on the short-term funding is not fixed. The rate can change. There is a risk that the rate might go up, and taking more and more short-term funding could expose you to more risk. There is a possibility you may not be able to pay on time. Then we have long-term financing. Long-term financing, clearly it matures after 1 year, so maturity more than 1 year. Rates on long-term financing, they are normally higher than the short-term rates. Like your short-term rate is 8%, your long-term interest rate would be 10%, 12%. Effects on working capital, interestingly, since it's a long-term liability which is not a component of working capital, your current assets in the form of bank increase, but your current liability stay the same. So in case of long-term financing, your working capital would increase. But unfortunately, it will also bring in it will increase the capital in the form of debt. So this will increase leverage for you. Your financial leverage will go up. What are the advantages? Advantage is that you have to pay this interest and the loan back in an extended period of time, so you will have more availability of funds for a longer period. Since most of the long-term financing is on fixed interest basis, so you will be saved from interest rate volatility. That's a good advantage. But there are disadvantages also, because long-term debt carries higher interest rates. Higher interest rate means that maybe in the future if the interest rates fall, but since you are locked in at a higher rate, you could be in trouble. So guys, that ends your working capital management part 2 completely.